Welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, where we sit down and have real conversations with business leaders that have been where you are. During these interviews, we'll dive into what it takes to improve systems and champion processes that maximize performance. Each week, our trailblazing guests share their experiences and understanding of the workforce to help inspire change, challenge our thinking, and share what it takes to successfully travel the road to profitability. Now here's our host, co-founder and chief evangelist of About Time and WorkMax, Mike Merrill.
Hello and welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast. I am your host, Mike Merrill, and I am here today sitting down with Amy Peck. Amy is the founder and CEO of EndeavorVR. And what they do is they have a strategy consulting firm that's focused on augmented reality tools and that symbiotic frontier type technology. So super cool stuff. Really excited about this conversation today. Hello, Amy, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So there's all these R's, right? This podcast might be R-rated, I guess, because of all the reality going. Or you're a reality star. I don't know what to really call this, but anyway, really cool, exciting stuff. And I think the listeners will really enjoy tuning into some of the things that you can shed some light on. And but to start off, what is XR technology, just for those that may not know?
Yeah, and you said the R's, and I think it's interesting that in this industry, R stands for reality, but we now have really four kind of acronyms for the different realities. And so just to level set, augmented reality. So if you've ever played Pokemon Go, it's basically just like a heads up display, right? It's just putting like kind of plonking a kind of digital object in your field of view. And then you typically would hold up your phone. Eventually we'll get to the wearables that look like this. But I used to turn off the AR functionality on Pokemon Go because it was just pasted on, and it was, it didn't have any context to the real world. And so it was more annoying than anything else. And then on the completely opposite end of the spectrum is virtual reality. So you're actually in a headset and you can't see your surroundings, and it's a completely controlled environment. And then in the middle is kind of mixed reality. So that would be MR. And that's where I think it gets really interesting, because what that is really a kind of a blending of the physical and digital. And we're not quite there yet, but for example, relative to construction, if you were able to hold up your phone and then be able to see BIM data, for example, right, sort of through the wall, giving you, X-ray vision. So then it kind of has context to the actual location. And we're moving towards that. There are some mobile devices that, are, capable of sort of showing that interaction. And then we talk about XR, or extended reality, that's kind of the umbrella of all of the realities. And then, of course, we can't forget IRL, just in real life.
Yeah, right. Is that even a thing anymore?
It's, apparently it's not, because all we do is this all day long.
It's so outdated. Well, cool. Well, lots of really cool tech topics. If we were to focus in on one, let's start with maybe XR technology. How is construction taking advantage of XR technology today?
Well, I would say that maybe I would just, qualify that by saying, how could they? Because I think there hasn't been, there's been a lot of advancements, and there are certainly companies that are out there, not only that, construction companies can leverage, but also companies, using the technology to improve their processes. And there are really any number of ways you can kind of slot the technology in throughout kind of the building lifecycle management, starting with design, through the construction phase, and then kind of post build and as built. But where we're finding the most challenges are outside of mobile AR, and we can, look at the devices. There's mobile AR, and then there's the HoloLens 2, which is a Microsoft product, which is a true mixed reality kind of wearable. And then Magic Leap, which is similar. They're a smaller company, actually not that small, because they've taken in a lot of investment, but technically a startup based in Florida. And so those are sort of your, mixed reality and augmented reality devices. And then there's things like, RealWear. Of course, Google Glass is still out there, believe it or not, and Vuzix and a few others. but it's very difficult to bring this technology, into a construction site, mainly because there are some inherent hazards in a construction site. Often there's not connectivity, which is one of the big challenges. And you've got workflows that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? It's sort of working. And though I think this technology will be really impactful, in the future on construction sites, and there are lots of examples of how it is being used today. I would say that for most companies, you may want to start, if you're just looking at this technology, in the kind of design and BIM management phase, and then the kind of as-built phase, whether it's around, again, viewing BIM data, interior design, maintenance, all of that. And I can talk about some of the use cases throughout that process, but imagine remote teams being able to collaborate. That's sort of one of the great benefits of virtual environments. And this can be done in both, sort of a mixed reality or AR environment, or virtual reality. But if you have remote teams who need to look at the sort of either the same 3D asset or the same Revit models, you could do that remotely. We could actually be in virtual reality right now, looking at plans for a particular site, or being able to take again the HoloLens. I actually have a Magic Leap here somewhere, but you can wear a HoloLens, and you could actually walk just in sort of an empty construction site, or say you're doing a big kind of retrofit. You could actually walk through the building, put on the glasses, or use your iPad, and you could actually see what the transformation is going to be.
Like you're walking through the building, basically, right?
Yeah, and that even extends. You can see how it can easily extend to even interior design, and kind of looking at how you're going to build out the building, for a prospective tenant to go in and say, these are the 5 different options that you could have, tomorrow, and they get to see everything, so that we don't get a million change orders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Well, that's a great tool right there for sure, if it could eliminate some of those. So one of the areas that I commonly hear it being utilized by more companies today, kind of an easier entry point, is maybe wearables for safety. I mean, what can you tell us about what's going on there?
Yeah, so there again, HoloLens, you can actually wear safety glasses underneath. Magic Leap are ANSI certified, so it really depends on what kind of environment you're in. They do need to be ruggedized, and there are some great applications, in the construction site. But again, you do need Wi-Fi connectivity or some kind of a server to be able to deliver an experience, unless it's just a singular experience. But there are a number of companies who are kind of using it for LiDAR scan visualization, so point cloud visualization. And there are some companies, some very smart companies, that are actually using it to trigger payments. And that will certainly ensure that your contractors are actually going to use it, because what it does is, if you've got, let's say, a smart contract, and there are, certain tranches you have to hit in terms of completion to be able to trigger that next payment, you can actually go do a LiDAR scan, and you can have your team go and actually do a pass-through video where you are visualizing the LiDAR scan over the current state of the construction. And that can all be recorded and sent back, and then verified by the company who owes you money. So that is one of those areas where it's like, when anything triggers a payment, people pay attention.
It's funny, because I was going to ask you, all right, so practically, how does a company actually tie this to revenue, or how can they see this as a cost benefit as opposed to an expense of cool tech, right? Yeah. Love that. So this keeps running through my mind, but I just have to ask, how did you get on this path? I mean, are you just a nerd that just loves this stuff and can't keep away from it, or what? I mean, it's really actually pretty amazing.
It's funny. I've always been, a little bit of a geek in terms of like, how do things work? I remember I had a summer job, like sweeping the tennis courts at, when I was growing up at the local little tennis club, and the Coke machine broke, And so, and my part of my job was also refilling the Coke machine. So of course I had the keys, and of course I opened it up and I took it all apart. And I remember the tennis pro came and just rounded the corner, and there I was sitting on the floor with a screwdriver and a bunch of parts around me. And he just looked at me, and he just shook his head and he turned around and he walked away. And then, but I put it back together and I fixed it. And, it was always the one who was if you need the stereo wired, in growing up in school, I was the one who would rewire the stereo. And I just, I've always been fascinated by how things work. And I think I've always been fascinated by just technology in general. I've always really enjoyed it. And, but it took kind of a circuitous journey to it. And it wasn't really until I moved to San Francisco, I don't know, about 8 years ago from New York. And I was working with JP Morgan Chase, but we were working on a data product. So it was sort of my first time really working with data scientists. It was, right when, data was becoming a thing and everyone's talking about big data, right? And so it was a really interesting place to be. And that just started my curiosity, and that there's a lot more out there. And how do you blend, data and technology? And again, I think my focus has always been on how do we do things better. I wasn't ever really interested in how do we play with it or how do we use it in games, but it's how do we just do things better, and how do we improve our processes? And, in doing so, giving ourselves time back. And I think that does actually improve our lives.
Yeah, no question. Well, and in this day and age, obviously with the pandemic and all these other things, mobility and the ability to work from anywhere, it has become, and collaboration remotely has become just critical. I mean, mission critical. And so what are some, I know companies haven't totally gotten on the bus yet for all of these cool things. What are some technologies that are surprising to you that are maybe mobile solutions that companies have been able to leverage so far?
I have found it interesting. There's a company called Spatial, and there's several of these types of companies out there, but the reason I like Spatial is that they're cross-platform, and it's a web-based collaboration solution. And so you can join in sort of a Zoom 2D interface like we're doing right now, or you can join in a headset. You can join on your mobile device. So you either show up as a 3D avatar, or you show up as a 2D screen, but you can all look at the same thing. You can import 2D and 3D assets. Right now, if I wanted to show you a digital 3D asset, I'd have to share my screen. You wouldn't really be able to interact with it. And it's interesting because, pre the thing that shall remain nameless that we've all been working through for the past year and a half, I traveled 200,000 miles a year. So I was already kind of in this, how do we work remotely? And, I was always traipsing around, hotel rooms and looking for Wi-Fi and conferences. And, it became kind of second nature. So when everything changed, it was fairly simple. But what I found was very interesting is that, most companies don't, never really had this kind of remote collaboration construct. And so everyone was scrambling. And what it did for our industry was just opened up a lot more interest and proof of concepts. And again, the industry, is still technically a fairly young industry, but we also saw on the solutions side, companies really starting to grow and scale, because now we have users. We have people out there using the technology saying, wait, this works, this doesn't work. Oh, wouldn't it be great if we had XYZ? And we kind of need to hit that critical mass on both sides. It doesn't help us that, the technology's there, right? If you go out and you buy yourself a Quest 2 headset, regardless of what you feel about Facebook, you're going to get, it's whatever it is, you can get one for $299. You're going to get a pretty incredible experience, and you'll really get to see what VR is. But what we need is really a very broad swath of consumers, not just gamers, not just tech forward people, but consumers looking at the technology and then saying, oh, wait, I could totally do this at my job. And it's
use it for this too.
Yeah, and it's kind of the same thing that happened with mobile. You remember we used to carry around two phones? You get one for work and one. And then finally, the phones became so indispensable to us that we got to this bring your own device construct. And now it's we have kind of customized these devices so that they help us do everything, right? And it's going to be that same cycle with, augmented and virtual reality, until we really get some utility and a broad swath of people in. It's still going to be those like bleeding edge types of companies that are adopting it.
Yeah, there are, and it is interesting. You bring up, pre-pandemic, and that shall remain nameless. I can even think of probably 3 years ago, we were on doing a web presentation, product presentation, software overview with a company that was well over $1 billion a year annually. And they were having a really hard time logging into the web meeting. It was like 20 minutes of, I couldn't believe what was happening. And I'm thinking, you guys are how big? But they were just doing it old school and kept growing. And so I think now everybody knows how to get on a Zoom meeting. It's not a big deal. It's not a barrier of entry to anything. Like, that's just the way we do things now, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting too. I think, what I have found is that even some of the most staid companies now are they're in this like kind of digital transformation phase, right? That it was sort of a forcing function of what's gone on in the last couple of years. But I think now, and ironically, I think that some of those companies will have been saved by the fact that we were forced to look how technology could keep us moving and working together and collaborating remotely. And, that hopefully has now sparked a continuation, because we're in a really interesting time where it's not just AR and VR. I mean, you look at blockchain, blockchain is kind of ridiculous, like with NFTs, and that's all blowing up.
Whole other level.
And then artificial intelligence and robotics and automation and all of these technologies, 5G, edge compute, all of this is moving at such an incredibly fast pace that, companies who are just kind of sitting back and going, wow, we kind of like our ERP systems and our, that we've had for the last 25 years and it's all working fine. A lot of those companies really run the risk of being kind of displaced and not necessarily going out of business, but being kind of pushed off the Fortune 500 and being displaced by, companies that are more nimble, that are embracing technology. And the other really big consideration that companies need to consider is that you've got a next generation workforce coming in, right? And they're going to go with the companies that have the cool tech. They're not going to want to go to a company that has these arcane systems. And so, I always urge companies, I know that sometimes there's a stasis in this industry, and I understand it because it's a very, very big industry. The margins can be great, but one mistake can take out, profitability on a project. And so it's really, really hard to sort of change those workflows. But the beauty of doing it now and again, trying it on sort of the bookended sides, right? So in the design phase, in the process phase, even in training, right? There are a lot of things you can do offsite that can improve processes. And in doing that, what it does is you're sort of, get to dip your big toe in and start to make incremental change. And then as these devices start to populate on the consumer side, which they are, you just saw it, I don't know if you saw it, Facebook recently announced these, wayfarers, right? And it's funny because I've been referring to them as magic wayfarers forever. And now they actually really are. And it's not the device that we're going to be using at work. But again, what they've done is they're saying, look, we just need to get these devices on the market. This doesn't have the functionality that mixed reality does. It's spatial audio, so it's really, really good audio. And then they have outward facing cameras, which creeped everybody out when Google Glass came out the first time. But now we're all living out loud. We're so inured to being like filmed everywhere. So I think that, those are some of the ways that companies should look at just trying something, right? Whether it's AR or VR.
Yeah, I like that. So speaking of that, what is a minimum cost or investment? I mean, how complicated is it to get something started for even a small to medium-sized organization?
It's hard to say. I mean, honestly, I would just, if you don't want to invest in the devices, I would find that, there are a lot of kind of local universities that have devices, and I would, call local university. I would talk to economic development in your city and say, do you know anything about these devices? Does anyone have any? Could we get a demo? Call the companies, call Microsoft, Microsoft might be tough, but maybe one of the development houses that works with them, call Magic Leap, and say, we want to try these devices and get a demo. Those are much pricier devices, but you can get, like I said, you can get an Oculus, for $299. Get one for the office. Even looking at the games, believe it or not, can just give you a hint as to how you would use it. And there's a company called The Wild, and they basically do, they can take any kind of 3D model, like you can ingest your Revit models, then you can have remote teams all in the same environment, looking at the same models, annotating it, and then recording it, and then shooting it back out so that you can share with your colleagues on 2D screens. And so there are some really lightweight solutions that already exist that you can, if you can't get like a free license or a demo license, they'll at least walk you through what it does. And, you can spend a couple $100 for, 3 or 4 months to get sort of a temporary license to give it a shot and try it in your processes.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And a good comparable, at least that comes to my mind. I hear of lots of contractors that, in fact, I heard one the other day say, I think we bought like 5 drones. We're not using them yet. We don't know how to use them, but we bought them because we think we probably should have them. And, so I don't think a few $100 is a big deal for anybody that's in business.
No. And I think I would even say, before even doing that, like, I think you just start with one. And train somebody up. And I think it's really important before you buy technology. It's always important to identify, like, what problem are you trying to solve? Because technology is meaningless in a vacuum. So, if you think about some processes, and that's why I say get a demo first, then go back and say, all right, now that I understand, because it's impossible to explain what it's like to be in a virtual environment. Like, you think, and there's levels too. I think some people maybe have tried mobile VR. So it's where you take your phone, you put it in a headset, you look really, really cool. No, you do not.
Not stylish.
But yeah, but it wasn't like the graphics weren't great. It wasn't a great experience. But these new devices, Pico, which was actually just acquired by the company who owns TikTok, and the Facebook Quest. HTC has a professional sort of standalone version called the Focus 3. They're all, that one's a little pricier. That's probably around, I think, $500. But, again, get demos, go to conferences. There's one called Augmented World Expo coming up in Santa Clara, California. It's one of the largest kind of XR conferences, and there will be a lot of companies there showcasing different types of visualization tools, design tools, even actually using on the construction site, again, for that sort of point cloud visualization. So, there are a lot of touch points, and it's just sort of educating yourself, and don't be afraid of the technology. I think that's my main message.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Don't be afraid. So dip a toe, do one toe first, right?
Exactly.
Maybe not even the big toe.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously, you, like anything else, you just have to start with something. So your advice is, borrow one, get one, look at someone else's, whatever you have to do to try and get the ball rolling, and then kind of ease into it.
Yeah, reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn. We have lots of people who are experts in every single aspect of building lifecycle management. They can just give you some advice of like what to try and some of the software that you could use. And we just want to promote the industry. It's not about trying to get a gig. It's about pushing the industry forward and just helping people find a path to start bringing this technology in.
I love that. I think that's great advice. So tell me this, just switching gears a little more personally, what's something that you are super grateful for in your professional life?
Oh wow, I'm actually grateful for my entire professional life. I mean, I kind of joke that I stumbled upwards from day one, but that I've been really fortunate to be able to follow a really fascinating and rewarding career path that from the outside makes absolutely no sense to most people. They're like, what? You were in the music business and then commercial production and now you're doing this. But it all made sense to me because it was all a learning experience. And it was all about also what was fun for me and what was exciting. And this industry is really, really exciting for me. And I was lucky to kind of be one of the earlier people in it, in the world that I inhabit, which is sort of, XR for business and for enterprise. And I get to work with really amazing companies and people and technology every day. So yeah, pretty lucky.
Yeah, very cool. Love to hear that. You're grateful for your entire professional life. That's cool. So having said that, what is Amy Peck's superpower? When you put that cape on, what are you getting ready to do?
Well, aside from always getting really, really good parking spots, it's kind of amazing. Like the people laugh, like someone will really like move, like drive away, like right as I pull up. But that's my sort of general superpower. I think my business superpower is I think I have the decoder ring between the technical people and people who are less technical. And again, I think I can help people focus on the how and the why and not get so wrapped up in, like we should get some drones or we should get a headset. We should, look into blockchain or like what are NFTs? Like it's more like, how do you want to improve the way you do things? And what are the things that really bug you at work? And then now let's look at the technologies that could actually help you do all of that better. So I think I can sit in the middle there and kind of bridge that gap between the super tech talk and a practical use case.
Well, it's super exciting. I don't know how you sleep at night with all this cool tech going on. Your brain's got to be going 100 miles an hour all the time, I'm sure.
It's pretty fun. It is pretty fun.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Had so much fun and learned some things. And now I got some other homework I got to go check out and read up on this stuff you're talking about.
There you go. Whenever we're in the same place at the same time, I'll put you in a VR headset, and
I'd love to do that. That sounds.
And then I'll challenge you at Beat Saber. So
okay, all right, let's roll. I'm ready.
All right, let's do it.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll have to connect up down the road. I'm sure there's a lot of other great stuff you could talk about, but I've surely enjoyed today's conversation.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. If you liked the conversation we had today, or were able to learn anything new or helpful, please make sure to follow us on our WorkMax page on LinkedIn and on Instagram at WorkMax_. And subscribe to the show on iTunes or your preferred podcast platform so you will never miss another insightful episode. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review and share the show with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us and will allow us to continue providing impactful information with others looking to improve their results in their business and, in turn, their life.